diminish your spouse during separation or divorce, you demonstrate greed and a loss of integrity and responsibility to your children. Children learn from every action you make, whether intentional or not, can become the unintended consequences of your alienation to your spouse. Beware, being an alienator means you're willing to sacrifice your child's future. That never bodes well for the child once it is felt by them. You will also become the victim in your attempt to assuage your control. Kids perceive these back and forth control attempts. It is your child's future that you cannot know you are risking when you alienate, and you may be harmed once the child recognizes that you have been an alienator. Okay, I have with me Gary Jacobs, the president of the Americans for Legal Reform and a regular FIT TV contributor. All right, let's do one of our favorite topics. And it is really, when you think about it, because there is hardly a relationship, we should know, that doesn't have some kind of alienation in it, because it's a fairly common thing. People alienate each other, sometimes even joking,
right,
and it can be taken into as a serious problem. So yes, but once you're divorcing and separating and you're leaving the kids at risk, that's a totally different story, right, Gary?
Yeah, in fact, I remember I was in court for a case, and we were in the judge's chambers, and we were complaining about alienation, and the judge's clerk said, "I don't care about alienation. It happens all the time. There's not." And you know what? To an extent, as you said in your opening, he's right. You know, who doesn't make a comment every once in a while about the spouse?
Sure.
But there's a difference of saying, "Hey, your father's a slob. Hey, your mother's a bad driver." Yes, that is, but we know that there's a difference in saying your father's a piece of shit. He's trying to starve us out of the house. He doesn't love you. He's a child abuser. He beat me. There's a big difference.
Sure.
So there is, of course, there is different levels, but at some point, and that point may be a gray area, but at some point, it's not a gray area. It's child abuse.
That's
at some point,
it is child abuse.
It's child abuse.
Right. There's one small example I give people. I've done this on the show once before. Let's say the phone rings, right? And let's say, just for a moment for the audience, you're the child. I get a phone call, I ring, and I know it's my, let's use husband, that's because 80% of the custodial wards are the women, so I have to kind of like be the woman who's in the normal role. Hi, yeah, okay, now watch my action.
Right.
So you get, now, does that mean anything in general? Everybody has probably done that one time or other. They're kind of disgusted they're hearing from that person. They're turning their face on the phone, turning away. Simple gesture. That kid sees me doing this.
Right. Or, Chris, it could be simple as saying, your father is on the phone. That's a bit, it gets worse in many cases where they say, Chris is on the phone, Gary's on the phone. And I heard the other day, and some of these things are subconscious, that you just want to destroy the person, but one of the people who's been on the coast, Dr. Rivera, his fiance, Jamie Wagner, she was taking pictures. She went through a divorce, and she's one of the examples of how it works. But she was at a concert last week taking a picture of her children, and she said, "Oh, girls, pose. I want to take a picture for Daddy," and use the endearing term of Daddy, and that sends the other message that, hey, it's okay for you to love your father.
It's a good man, a positive.
It's a good, right? What I'm saying is a positive. And then on the other extreme, where the people many times they start calling the children's father by their first name.
Yeah.
Or the piece of shit is on the phone.
Oh my God! Yeah. The pictures come back with that person moved out or not in the picture.
Right. Yeah.
So you see his hand maybe around the arm or
cut out.
Like that.
So there's all these little things, but they all add up, and it's a cumulative effect. It's not. Listen, you're not going to alienate a child from one day saying your father's a jerk or whatever. Saying that this is an bombardment of the person over and over and over again. That one day when you're mad and you say something bad, of course it's not right, but that's not child abuse. Yeah. It's the relenting pounding about what a bad person.
There are degrees of everything, and we should know that there's degrees. We want our audience to know that there are degrees of alienation that are relative to this conversation. So we don't want to accuse everybody of doing something that's terrible. But once divorce and separation occurs, you could be under the microscope, which was a point in my opening too. And other people will see you act, and the child is more important, sees the parent act differently, managing even or assuaging the difference. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, Daddy's okay. And you can see the disingenuous in the action. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see Daddy next week or something. It just doesn't come off like, yeah, see Daddy. It's not the same. And,
well, one of the tricks
and
is,
all
of
these
course,
things matter. I'm sorry.
because actually, it reminds me of whenever I see an alienator go to court. Here they always say, I always tell them to go visit their father.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's a difference between, your father's making you go visit him today, and if you don't go, I'm going to get in trouble with the courts.
Yeah, right.
So then they can say, I just covered my ass because
then when
tell the judge how mommy encouraged you to go see daddy.
Right.
But that's not encouraging them. That's saying he's a piece of crap. I don't want you to go.
Where does the kid come up with the normal process when he's hearing that?
But this is what happens all the time, and then they go to court. And the judge, she did tell the kids to go. But there's a difference between telling them, because if you can't make your kids go, then you shouldn't be a custodial parent.
Yeah, right. You shouldn't deny custody, that's for sure. Just want to point to one thing that I did a long time ago with defending a Baldwin. I don't know if you ever saw the show.
Yeah.
I did a show. That particular show had caught a little bit of fire because I used the term defending a Baldwin, and people didn't relate to what the hell I was talking about because parental alienation was relatively unspoken about back in those days. That was what, 12 years ago? I don't know how many years ago it's been. I know, it's crazy, a long time.
You're referring to when he left the message on his
nasty message
his daughter's tape, yelling at her, and you're a miserable piece.
Anybody who hears that and doesn't know what happened is mad at Baldwin right away.
Right.
But my feeling about this is, you know how many people have been in that place before?
Right.
He just happens to be a celebrity.
He got pushed to the edge, and he just lost it. But I would say the same thing. We're not saying it's right what he did, but it's
right?
But it's understandable what he did. You can understand how he was. Let me tell you, his ex was the one who was responsible for pushing him to that point.
Right. And the ex did what? Took advantage of what legal issues she had. So we like to say that if the legal system was not inside a lot of these divorces, we might fare better. Our children might fare better. And I submit that if we mediated or took it out of court and didn't have the adversarial law impact us all from that position, we might stand a better chance of being healthier with our kids later on. We may be able to continue a happy relationship. Right. We talk about how often, how common it is, and we said before it's about 80-85% of the people have some form of alienation. That doesn't seem right, but it's about right.
Yeah, it may be higher. It's some form.
Yeah, it's high, some form, and it's relative in the degrees. But the alienators are often narcissistic. That is the serious ones.
That's the serious ones. They're absolutely narcissistic because when you're an alienator, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that when you turn your child against the other parent, you're destroying their life. And I don't even have all the statistics in my head, but when it's a girl, they end up dating somebody who's much older than them.
And they're more promiscuous also.
Absolutely, much more promiscuous. They're more likely to do drugs, look to escape, rebel, have bad relationships themselves. It's interesting that it's one of these things where there's a cycle of this because once a child is alienated from a parent, believe it or not, many times that child in their relationship ends up getting alienated from their children. So this starts a cycle. So
which people would have a tough time biting into, but it happens to be true.
It does happen. I mean, there's a list of the statistics that are the dropping out of school, the drug abuse, and what's interesting is a lot of people say, well, yeah, the kid's being alienated, but you know what? It must not be bad because they're doing well in school. Academics have nothing to do with alienation. There are plenty of people who have been alienated and children who were alienated who still do very well in school. But doing well in school doesn't mean doing well in life.
Right.
You can be, how many people do you know? You say, oh, this person's book smart, but they're freaking nuts.
Alienators also remove the other side of the biology of their family. So by pulling away the child's need to have that connection with the other side of the family, disturbs me, but I've seen it all the time.
Yeah,
if you have a kid not seeing or not communicating with and not involving themselves with one side of the family, that's a biological connection.
It almost always happens in alienation cases.
Yeah,
they remove from the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles.
The obvious is custody, but alienation creates it a lot.
And I'll tell you something interesting that happens in a lot of alienation cases, which a lot of people don't understand, is we talk about all the promiscuity and drugs and all these things. But one of the things that happens is when a child, and again, we'll use the case where the child is alienated from the father, and they don't talk to the father for years, and constantly the mother is saying, and I'll use for an example, your father is an alcoholic, he's nasty, he drinks all the time. Believe it or not, the child somehow in their mind will end up emulating what they are told the father is, as a way to be a part of that father.
And
so it's interesting. So then they'll become a drinker because they're trying to somehow hold on to a piece of that.
And if they happen to be mad at the parent, who's sometimes usually a custodial parent or the alienator, let's call him the alienator, they'll do that purposefully.
Yeah, it's an interest. Yeah, sometimes. But I think it is often that when they're alienated, they want to hold on to a piece and be somewhat like that person.
Yeah.
Good or bad, but a lot of times they're being that person.
Oh yeah, I'll be just like Daddy.
Who they're told that you're going to be. And a lot of times people say, the kids are going to come around one day and realize what their mother did to them. It doesn't always happen, but they're unhealthy. They're unhealthy people. Their brains are forming. Their ideas are forming.
They're also masking their true feelings of love and care for the family.
How does that teach you? Imagine teaching somebody to hold back.
That's a nice lesson to learn,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Not good.
Let's talk a little bit about the legal aspects. For instance, like a false order of protection is very common today to get custody. And that also can start once the parent is, I can't think of a correct word, now feeling good about themselves because they won custody. Right. They become narcissistic and controlling and then alienates the children kind of naturally by having all their time being spent with one person.
Right. Well, one of the things interesting about alienation, people say, what's the way to fight it? Well, the best way to fight alienation is contact. And the best way to get an alienation case to move further along when you get a child who's almost alienated but they're not totally there is all they got to do is make that final step and they get that order of protection. Now the person is removed from the house, has no contact, and in Suffolk County, because our system's run by a corrupt judge, Judge Henricks, who's corrupt and doesn't care about children's lives and relationships with the father. I mean, this man's just a real piece of crap, this Randall Henricks. Doesn't care about children whatsoever, even though it's supposed to be in the best interest of the children. So they let these orders of protection go on sometimes for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Imagine 8 weeks with zero contact.
Sure.
So now not only they have no contact, what happens is the other parent now has got free range to say, even the judge thought your father was dangerous. Even the judge thinks he's a bad person, so much so that he's not allowed to be with you. And then they'll go to court and they'll offer a supervised visitation. Yeah. I say, oh my God, they're so worried that your father's going to damage you that you need to have a supervised visitation with an armed guard standing out front of you, or a supervisor, because he can't be trusted alone with you. And that just pushes the alienation over the top. And the judges in Suffolk County and Nassau County, not only do they allow it, they encourage it. Because they should bring these cases right into court and go after the person who made the false allegations, but they don't.
False allegation is sometimes just the beginning of the lying process.
But let me just say, for the people who are watching the show, do something about it. Sue. Go to court and file a lawsuit. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, filing a false police report. Those are causes of action that you can file. Do not just drop. The courts won't do anything about it.
Right.
They don't care. It's up to you to do it. And I don't know if that's one of the things you want to discuss about what to do, but I'm telling people, do not go to court, demand your court date. Do not ever settle. Go to court, win the court date. Never settle, because they're going to try to talk you into settle and then sue the shit out of the person who did it. And guess what?
Repeat the claims again.
Well, intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Okay.
And many times they'll call the police first before they get the order of protection. That's great. You go into court with a police report. Police would never lie. This is what it said.
Yeah.
So now you get found not guilty, and then go to court and sue for filing a false police report and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You may not always win, but just think about getting in front of a jury of your peers and how they would feel about somebody who filed a false report and took you to court to keep you from your child.
Do you get a jury at that point?
So you can get a jury because you're in civil. Listen,
they may throw. You have to ask for a jury.
Only get a jury and let the other person see what it's like to have a lawsuit being held over their head.
What disturbs me is the subtle lying becoming normal. That you'll find that in an alienated family, one party is deceiving the other in some way, and it kind of like becomes the normal process of lying becomes normalized.
We're not talking about my case, but in my case, I think my daughter was 8 years old, and my ex-wife made an allegation of me being physically abusive to her.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't true, but what does she do to solidify the case? She makes sure she says that the allegation happened in front of my 8-year-old daughter. I think she was 8 at the time. I could be off by a year or two, but in front of my daughter, because now you can throw the kids in. Otherwise, it would just be an order of protection against her.
Right.
She's like, but now what do I do? So she gets my daughter to file a false police report that she witnessed me abusing my ex-wife. which wasn't true, and she ended up admitting, my ex-wife admitted in court that it's not true. But now the alienation is really big, because how does my daughter ever look me?
Was there any result to the fact that you proved that it wasn't
No,
true?
the judge said go home. She ran out of court crying. The judge basically called her a liar. But now how does my daughter feel? How does she ever look me in the face knowing that she just went into court and testified against me with a lie?
How did she?
She never did. She always, the relationship was permanently damaged. Now, I will say the judge did a good job when he called her a liar. But you know what? He should have right then said, and Mrs. Jacobs,
You don't get custody.
I'm referring, well, not only, he wasn't in custody, I'm referring you to the police department, the district attorney, for filing a false police report and for committing perjury. He didn't have the balls to do it.
Perjury is not punishable in his
They
civil
can
court,
do
right?
it. I believe they can charge with
I would love to know that.
Yeah, but they tell you it's up to you to do civilly. But he should send it to the DA for filing a false report. Because that's exactly, but he didn't. He let it go, and he said, "Hey, go home."
How much weight will that carry?
Well, listen, if you have if somebody's got
Something.
filing a false police report, at least they'll
False
you know
report,
what? They'll
acknowledgement of the false report.
they'll
wipe
be
it
much
out.
more careful about doing it a second time.
That's a good point. Now, the matrimonial lawyers, when they get involved in divorce, there's a misrepresentation that goes on when you're protected by one side and the other side is protected by somebody else, and there's a combative nature, in adversarial law when you're in court.
Right.
When the alienation of a parent's already underway, they acquire some of that and use it as tools. Isn't that more falsehoods upon the false relationship that has begun? The alienation has begun in a false environment, and now you have the attorneys backing and supporting.
Well, I think the attorneys many times encourage the alienation.
That's something.
And unfortunately, it's not easy to sue them. And in my case, there was a lawyer, Donald Schlimbaum,
It's
who
offsetting, I know.
told my ex-wife what to do. Basically, basically was telling her,
Fall
do
down or
this,
something,
and,
yeah.
and she would say, "Oh, my attorney told me to do it."
Yeah.
So. There's attorneys like that are these are just real scum, but they should be going after it too. And let me tell you, for anybody watching, you can sue the attorney. I sued Donald Schlimbaum.
Mm-hmm.
I sued him for malpractice.
Did it work?
Of course it didn't work, but guess what? Guess what? My ex-wife stuck him for $30-something thousand because he had to get off of her case. He spent a year approximately going to court with me in Riverhead before listen. It's stacked against me. I'm not an attorney. It was stacked against me. They were just looking for, when you go to the court, they're not looking for a way to help your case move forward. They're looking for a way to dismiss your case.
Yeah.
They're not looking to be fair. So I knew that going into it. But you know what? Sue the bastard. Sue him. Let him spend some of his time and money in court. Let him have his malpractice insurance go up because he had a claim against him.
What about the courts determining fitness, and to the extent that alienation creates? I'm trying to draw in the entire process. It may not be too easy to do, but the courts only determine they only go after one parent as being fit or unfit. Right. And does that creates another imbalance or further imbalance of alienation if it's already begun? So you already have, now you're unfit. The one parent who's been tested is unfit. How does that ever look to the kid?
Right.
Whatever happens that can be good from that
well,
moment on.
Like I always say, it's that the courts are accomplices in the alienation. The courts can stop this at any point. There are a few judges out here that do, but
not too many.
I said a few.
Yeah,
very few.
Yeah.
But they can listen. They can nip it in the bud. They get right in the court and say, "Mrs. So and So, there's allegations of alienation. If I find out that they're alienated, or these kids stop going with their father, or they stop respecting him, that means that you cannot be a good parent, encourage the relationship with the other parent, and you're going to lose custody." You nip it in the bud.
You wish. You hope.
You got to nip it in the bud.
Yeah, I guess. You remember, what's her name? Oh boy, the one person who wrote the book. I'm sorry.
Amy Baker?
No, we had her on the show. Gottlieb.
Linda Gottlieb.
Yeah, we had her on the program, and she did a great job explaining what parental alienation was. And she wrote the book because she was alienated.
Right.
So she was a psychotherapist, and she handled that very well in the discussion. And a small segment of that might be added to this program in terms of 2 or 3 sentences that she used. I just watched the show again because I used it in preparation for this one. But I'll pull a sentence out of that to do it, because I think the DSM-4 has only barely acknowledged that parental alienation existed. Now we're up to DSM-5, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's not in there again, but there's other folie à deux is a thing you can use, but I don't care what you call it.
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for those
but
people who
I don't
don't
care
know.
what you call it. Turning a kid against a parent does not make you a good parent. Right. Don't call it alien. Call it freaking child abuse. That's what it is.
Really?
It's child abuse.
Really. In your experiences with the people that have come to you, I know there's a lot of people that have come to you for help, because a lot of people come to me for help, and I barely can help them. I try to send them to you.
Thanks so much, because I have nothing else to do with my time.
Well, what's inside the court, I trust your experience. I don't have that much experience inside the courtroom. It didn't happen to me like that. I didn't have any trial. So what is your advice? What can you do to people who experience this parental alienation? They tell you the story. You've heard it a million times.
I know exactly how it's going to go. If they're policemen, I tell them, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get an order of protection. Your gun's going to get removed because your ex is going to say you came home when you pulled your service revolver on her. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that I could tell. I don't want to give away all the hints, but we know what. Here's my advice to them.
Yeah.
First of all, I tell them, if you're in Nassau and Suffolk, you're screwed. I'm telling them right off the bat, it's an uphill battle. So here's what I say. Do not let it drag on. Fight like a son of a gun right out of the box. Throw all your assets, all your resources, all your energy to fighting, because what the courts do is say, all right, let's do a forensic exam. Well, that's 6 months. Yeah. Then let's have a court date to look at it, another 3 months.
You'll never get to see
now
your kid after that.
It doesn't matter what happens at that point, because you're alienated.
Yeah, see,
do not let any time go by.
That's a key feature. So you're going to call this what? Don't delay in the fight.
Go right in, throw it all out there. And when I say throw it out there, I don't care if every single week your wife does something to alienate.
You want to keep a relationship with your kids, you got to fight right away.
Right. I don't care if, I tell people, I do not care if every single week your ex-wife does something to alienate your future ex-spouse, will say, file a motion for contempt. File a lawsuit. I don't care if you are in court and you have 10 lawsuits and 10 contempt orders and 10 petitions for custody, because at some point the judge is going to say, stop the petitions, and you're going to say, well then judge, do something about it, because my kids are I don't care. You know what? Fight fire with fire. I had a woman come to me and ask me, she said, oh, I want to share custody. I said, well then ask for shared custody and come with an agreement. I said, because it's going to hurt the kids otherwise. She came back to me months later and said, my husband filed all these false orders against me and had me followed and set me up and stole my cell phone and did all these things. I said, God, why would he do that when you were looking for shared custody? She says, well, although I was looking for shared custody, my attorney told me we should put in the papers that we want full custody, and then we'll negotiate down. I said, you know what? I don't blame your husband. And people might not like this, what I'm telling him. I'm telling you, if your ex is alienating your child against you, try to get help from the courts for 2 or 3 months. If you don't get the help, I don't care what you do. Fight fire with fire. Call the police every frickin' day. I don't care. Do the same thing that they did. Make false allegations against them. Get orders of protection against them. To me, when somebody's trying to steal your kids, and I didn't do this in my case. Yeah. I thought the courts would be justice. The courts here, what if you have a piece of shit judge like I had, Marion McNulty? What if you're in court now and you have Aletha Fields, you have Bloom, I forget her first name. What if you're in Nassau County and you have Judge Zimmerman? You're screwed. So fight back, because you have nothing to lose. You are going to lose your children. The courts are not going to help. And no matter what you do. The very idea that you're leaving it up to them is I tell them, do not fight back with the court. Give the judge the opportunity to do the right thing. Here's the alienation. You need to stop it. If the judge doesn't do it and your kids are being turned against you, I don't care what you do. Everything is on the table. Because you're fighting for your kids. File a police report.
Right.
Who cares?
You should never be in this particular place if you want to know the truth. But if you have to,
you can't help
have
it
to
sometimes.
do these kinds of things.
Fight back. Fight fire with fire.
Yeah.
Hire a private investigator, get
them follow them. That's another thing I was going to ask you.
I fight with everything. Hire a private investigator, get a GPS,
what holds
get
up
tracking
in court
systems.
For a private investigator?
Listen, you never know what you're going to get. You might catch your ex driving, drinking and driving, talking on the cell phone with the kids, or you just never know. Let me tell you, people have come to me with crazy stuff.
And it works.
You never know what. It absolutely works, because you have a bargaining chip. People say, oh, they don't care. You never know what you're going to get. Fight fire with fire. Fight back.
Well, in some respects, I think that some kids are going to look at what their mother or father would do when they're in this particular place and say that, well, I'm glad that they did fight. I've heard some kids say that.
Yeah.
I've heard some, and I'm surprised by that, because fighting. What are we fighting? You're fighting a system that you pour money into, and you have some obscure judge going to make a decision on me. I mean, where do you go with the common sense out of that?
So my kids were alienated against me. All three of my kids were alienated against me and my entire family. But I could put my head down at night knowing that I fought for 11 years.
Yeah.
I finally gave up. But you know, when I could sleep, and I have all the papers, and people say to me, "Can I throw away all those papers?" I have every transcript from the day one for the 11 years I was in court. I have every text message, every email, every telephone recorded conversation. I have everything, and that's for if my kids ever come back, they can never say to me, "Dad, you gave up on us. You didn't fight."
Yeah, you know, who wants to be in that place to have
Right.
that
But
kind
I tell
of discussion?
people, throw it out there and fight.
Yeah.
Because it would hurt the kids. Sometimes people say, "I can't deal with this. My ex is turning the kids against me, and I know I'm going to lose. The judge doesn't care." I say, "But at least your kids will know that you will lose. But for your kids' sake, let them know that you fought for them.
You know what?
Because hopefully down the road, you can come back and say, because they're going to hold it against you that you didn't fight for them. Because they do want you to fight for them, Chris."
Yeah, well, you're the president of the Americans for Legal Reform, and Carl Ancicero was the past president, and we just awarded him a lifetime achievement at the party we had recently. But you know, I always tell him, if I die, I want you to buy another plot next door for me for all my papers, my EBTs, my examination, my interrogatories, put them all in that one spot.
I said,
and then put a signpost over it, you know.
Yeah.
Here lies Chris, and
Listen,
here lies his papers.
I think Suffolk County, Nassau and Suffolk County court system is responsible for deforestation. It's as simple as that. You know, there's all the papers that have that trees that are cut down for unnecessary. It's garbage. It's shuffling papers for lawyers to make money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I hope you don't have the same fate I do. Shall I plan ahead of time and get you a plot next to you? Gary, thank you very much for covering parental alienation with me. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. And at FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.